I gotta stop listening to myself talk when I do this because I try to change it as I'm saying it instead of work with what I'm doing. I don't know. It's just it's like a feedback loop. It's where distortion and distorting everything. I don't know. It's weird. God, I feel stupid looking at myself, trying to control how I look and not just. I don't feel like I'm being natural, my usual self. But the past few days, maybe weeks, I'm kind of losing track of time. I wouldn't say it's much more than a week, though. I've been really, things have been buzzing around in my head, like I've been thinking about things that are like, I'm focusing on the basic building blocks of what make up all that is possible, right? Like relativity and dimensions and like zero's place in a relative universe and stuff. And it's like it's like it's like it creates all these questions in my mind that are fun to. I mean, it's kind of it's nice to be able to speculate and theorize and visualize and from on all these ideas, and it's nice to be able to do that. But I've come to this idea, which I don't, I haven't fully fleshed out because it's so many aspects to everything. So many viewpoints and levels of understanding and elements of it, and but I was thinking about this three-dimensional reality, which is, what's a dimension, but, and based on space, a dimension is like two opposing or whatever directions, two opposing directions, right? Or relative points of view or relative directions. And you take three of those relative directions and you create the third three-dimensional space, right? But what if you were not just able to see three dimensions, but it's like, how did I come to this? To what I'm trying to explain. Maybe I can get there. Explain it. It's like you have to take in consideration the point of view of each opposing direction of each dimension, and how they relate, especially, I guess, to other opposing perspectives, which create another dimension, and so on and so forth, possibly into almost nearly infinite or potentially infinite number of dimensions where if you were a sphere or a point which could observe every direction, every opposing direction, you know, in every direction, which would be each opposing direction would be a dimension, you would be seeing potentially all dimensions simultaneously, as well as understanding that they oppose each other. You know, that, you know, depending on which individual direction you look in, it's like no matter which direction you look in from any point, one dimension has, no matter how you rotate, one dimension always from, at least, let's say you can only change two dimensions at once. You can turn this way, you can turn this way, yaw, pitch, and you can only change, and you could potentially change two at the same time, but there's always one axis or dimension that you can't change. You can't change all three dimensions at the same time, you know, from the way we experience this dimension or whatever. There's always one constant, you know. You can change that constant, but that would make one of the other constant other axis is the constant, you know. So it would always be, no matter how you turn, you can't change all three dimensions at the same time. You can't, or axes. You can rotate, and suddenly left become, in terms of left and right, you can rotate this way where right becomes left and left becomes right, or you can pitch where forwards becomes back and back becomes forwards, and you can even yaw and pitch, if that's what it's called, at the same time, change two dimensions, but then that creates another axis, which is the constant, you know, I guess you would call it. I don't know. You can't change. There's always a constant, no matter how you try to change your perspective. There's always, you know, you can only change two things out of the three. There's always a constant, you know. And I was thinking, if you were a single point which could view all dimensions in all directions, which would be simultaneously viewing all potential dimensions within the third dimension, three dimensions, or all three sets of dimensions simultaneously, you know, X, Y, and Z, if you could change your perspective, it would change all, you know, that's the only way you could maybe change all three dimensions simultaneously is by, I don't know, you can't, spinning and rolling at the same time, I don't know, but and tilting at the same time. But to have that perspective in a three-dimensional space, it creates, from being able to see three-dimensional space from all angles, and you would be seeing so many dimensions at the same time that it would kind of be potentially infinite, you know, I don't know, it's hard to picture. But I think if you could could view all dimensions simultaneously, it might create a loop. It might create, it might be a planet in orbit in a torus, pattern, and then to let's see, but potentially an infinite set of toruses to create, like, I don't know, that's what I'm saying. Potentially, it's hard to see, but I don't know. And where does zero stand in a relative universe? I mean, what's opposite zero? Negative zero, based on, one's opposite, which is negative one. Would zero be negative zero, which Google calls, defines as undefined or indeterminate? And really, I just wonder if it's the point, when zero when zero, the opposite of zero is negative zero, which is like, might create a reflection, or mirrored universe, or mirrored perspective, where zero would be over here, negative zero would be over here, or whatever, two sides of zero, one being positive, one being negative, and from the perspective of the negative zero, you would be everything, which it would be like turning around and seeing, but I mean, not turning around, but positive would become negative and left would become right. But I don't know if you could change up and down, or I think zero may also be negative zero. They may be the same, or two sides. I guess it is two sides of, zero and negative, or is both zero and negative zero at the same time, depending on which direction you go. I think zero is negative zero, and vice versa. And which way you orient yourself. Also, I think it comes into play somehow, given, up and down in a three-dimensional environment. But, it's nice to kind of wonder where this all leads, and to be able to kind of go through the process of gaining these, I guess, insights or understandings. I'm sure other people already understand. There are people that already understand the things I'm talking about, but to be able to figure out how they figured it out, is kind of fun. Without reading, something, just taking what I understand and elaborating and extrapolating upon it, and that's kind of, it's like I'm actually doing it myself for the first time. I've done it as if I had done it, as if I had done it myself, but someone else has already done it. I'm just not aware of it. But it's the experience of figuring it out. It's kind of fun, it's kind of interesting. Excuse me. I guess that's possibly why Einstein said every action has an equal and opposite reaction, because from the point of zero, if you do something positive, there will always be something relative or opposite. It's like if you move in a positive direction, what it creates a negative. It creates the opposite. You know, like if you start at the 0 point and you move 5 units or a certain amount in a positive direction, from the point of 0, there is still the opposite direction, equal and opposite direction, which you know, it's like 0 is the only real point of view, the only point that matters, or is potentially unchangeable, you know, in that it predates everything that comes after it, you know, no matter which direction you go. 0 is like the starting point, you know, and it's like, the only thing that doesn't, the only thing that is its own opposite, you know, that can relate to itself, maybe, potentially, based on the fact that there are opposing opposites relative to 0, you know. It's like 0 can relate to itself. 0 is how everything relates, you know. Perhaps is relativity. Maybe. What makes relativity possible. And from the point of 0, I mean, according to everything that exists, 0 doesn't exist. But 0 is the point at which everything becomes possible. So, which is the starting point, which is like and because you can go in any direction from the 0 point, and by doing so create, you know, there, because you can, that also means there's an opposite direction. It's like 0 is the only real, only thing that is actual. You know, it's nothing. It's 0, what we call nothing, or the point of potential becoming actual or real. But if you can kind of grasp what I'm saying, which helps me, like, it gives me ideas on dimensions and perspectives and